Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dusk Network's Town Hall Community Forum. My name is Fahad Rana, Dusk Network's official community builder and lead, including your host today. And I want to thank all of you with us today on Tuesday, November 15, 2022, for joining the session as my guests. This is a special ITN session where we bring in one or more of our specialists in the team to talk about different aspects of Dusk Network. Today, we have our star core developers with ITN project lead Hein Dauven and the kingmaker Emanuele Paterna, also known as Sepia. So today we're discussing about the forthcoming Rolling Incentivized Testnet, ITN, its imminent launch, and what you should expect. Rolling ITN is an important milestone for our decentralization ambitions, and it is important for us to simultaneously gather the community's feedback, as well as addressing any potential questions related to running a node and secure the network further. We will briefly touch upon our upcoming ambassador program as well, focus on community expansion, and our ongoing Wiki Documentation efforts. We look forward to celebrating this milestone together with the community by preparing you for the release of the Rolling ITN. It will be an important step towards furthering our mission and vision toward mainnet. So, Hein, hope you're doing well, and I'm going to throw this question right at you. So what is the point of ITN? Is it to showcase a certain product?
Hey everyone. Just to clarify, Dusk is not really a product. It's a protocol, right? So products you build on top of the protocol. And what's the point of ITN? ITN is there to help people, or to help us at Dusk, not only to test the network, but also to educate the community about how to run a node and how to become professional node runners. Because some of you in the community will, of course, be running this in 4 or 5 years, and it's important therefore that we are sure that people know how to work with the node and how to manage and operate it in a safe way.
All right, Hein, thank you for answering the first question. I'm sure that we're off to a rolling start. The second question that I actually had was, why did you actually decide to call it Rolling ITN? Because I believe the community needs a bit of clarification.
Yeah, so Rolling suggests that it's a longer running program, something that consists of multiple aspects, right? Multiple activities. One of the things we noticed when doing research on other ITNs is that most of these ITNs are relatively short and more of a marketing gimmick, often just running a week or 2 weeks, right? And not really testing a whole lot of other networks. And what we wanted to do with our ITN is, after gathering all sorts of information from stakeholders, is that we want to extensively test the network, but also educate the community. And by doing so, we would need a more extensive program. And, Rolling suggests that multi-phased and also flexible in terms of being able to test new changes that we make. That Rolling made sense. And that's why we call it Rolling ITN.
That's great, because it's a very popular question coming in from the community over and over on why we actually called it Rolling. Okay, but thank you for clarifying that. So now that people will remember. So this next question is for Sepia. Sepia, why are we pushing ITN on an old tech stack?
This is because what we want to test at this particular point in time is the consensus. That is pretty more stable. So basically, even if we want to change something slightly in the future, all the node decentralization, the consensus algorithm is something that is not related to the implementation detail, even if we will change it from Golang to Rust. So we want to test the product. So some aspect of the testnet really don't matter if it's a node stack or a new one. We just want to stress test and beta test the protocol implementation, not the technical implementation.
I see. Thank you very much for that explanation. So how technical will it be to run a node on ITN, Sepia?
Well, our goal is to have it as simple as possible. But of course, in the first stage of the ITN, it will be a little bit more complex, let's say, but not so much. I mean, if you are able to install something on your Linux machine, you will not have so much difficult to run a node.
Okay, so it is you would say that it's pretty much like it's easy to kind of go through with documentation and stuff as long as it's applied, right?
Yeah, indeed. If you have, we will provide a lot of documentation. We will start with the minimal requirement documentation to run a node. There will be no trouble no problem in following that guide. So it would be easy even for no tech savvy, not lot tech savvy, let's say.
Well, that is true because I've seen the documentation myself, and from what I've seen so far, it seems like it's very simple. And I believe Yannick and I were also able to kind of go through just kind of the simplification of documentation, and I think Yannick actually even tried to do that. So that's fantastic. What are the system specs that ITN will be working on?
There will be a very low spec system. Our current cluster are running with very low CPU frequency. I mean, we just have only one CPU and 1 gigabyte of memory, so it will be very cheaper to run a node.
Really good to know, because there might be people out there that want to run the node and want to have the initiative too, and they don't want to have like a new GPU like a 4090
Nah. Yeah, I completely get it, but we don't need GPU. We don't have to mine anything. So we are energy saving.
That's fantastic. And how long, for example, will this ITN run for?
Yeah, so that depends a bit. We will have multiple phases in ITN, but this first phase will run from very, very soon until the end of the year. But after that, we will do 2 more runs, and that will probably be a couple of months. And the reason why we do this is to properly test and think about the results that we get from each test. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it's going to be, since we're going to be going through the rolling ITN phases, it makes sense to basically go through every aspect of the protocol and try to make it as secure as possible. So yeah, makes sense. Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, and Sepia, what are the stages of running a node based on knowledge? Like how early can non-tech savvy people run the node?
Well, there will be stages, because we will start with more tech-savvy documentation, but we aim to. Our goal is to improve this documentation and create and release a different version of installation script and monitoring script that will get the life easier for the people that run a node. So let's say that, for example, if we start with the more complex script to run a node, we will roll out a new version time by time to onboard people that are not so familiar to update the script and other things. So.
Sorry, go ahead.
What are the stage? There will be a rolling. Let's say that we will have a rolling ITN even on the installation aspect.
Yeah. So we currently have documentation that targets what's it called? That targets like cloud providers, right? So it makes sort of minimal assumptions around the setup. So we assume you use like DigitalOcean or Vultr, and then it's tailor-made for a specific operating system. But so what we're also going to do is, like Sepia mentioned, we're going to provide a script, we're going to provide a Docker image, and then at some point we will do a webinar where we walk through every step, like installing Rust, installing Golang, how to pull the code from the GitHub, how to compile everything, and then walk through step by step to, at some point, I'm not sure when, but at some point in the future, almost getting to a one-click solution, right? And that's what we're working towards. And the deeper we go into it, but the thing, of course, with the current ITN is what we don't want to do for node decentralization is we don't want to incentivize people for running a one-click node launch, because then we're not doing what we want to do, and that is testing and teaching people how to run the nodes. Because in the future, some of the people in here will be here in 4 or 5 years, and they will become sort of professional node operators, and then you need to have some knowledge of what you're doing. And we don't want to end up with node runners that make mistakes in their configuration and then end up losing their the stakes, right? Or something similar to that.
Yeah, it makes sense. So it also seems to be the case that, once we're going to be going towards the phases of testnet, of ITN actually, the implementation will get easier and easier as rolling ITN kind of goes forth. So it makes sense in that scenario as well. Okay. And the next question is also for you, Hein. So what are the different types of activities that are going to be happening on ITN?
Yeah, so the primary activities will be around the node decentralization drive, right? That will be split in 3 phases, which the first one we will be launching very, very soon. And then we also have other stuff, like we will probably be launching an ambassador program, and we will be launching a bug bounty program and a hackathon. And there are some other ideas that we have that I can't disclose yet that will probably be interesting for people. And a learn and earn program, for instance, that targets both people on selling the mission and vision of Dusk to them, as well as developers.
Okay, that's fantastic, actually. And this has been an actual very popular question from the community. Are there going to be pilots on ITN, and when can we expect them?
On ITN, well, I mean, I can probably not tell too much about this, but maybe people are already building pilots on the existing tech stack. Maybe. I mean, I think that's already been hinted at before, right? So I don't think that's anything secret. I mean, of course, I can't name names, so I can't say what we're building, but yeah, there are people actually building actual serious people are building stuff.
That's quite exciting, and a bit of
And
a
just as a note, this is not happening on the testnet that we're running. It might be happening somewhere else where people might see stuff, but just to be clear.
No, that's fine. It's I was saying that's just a bit of a tease, but thank you for that. I mean, I'm in the know, but still for the community, it's a bit of a tease, and I'm excited for them as well. So these were some ITN specific questions. I'm going to move on to the ITN roadmap questions. So a question for you, Hein. What aspects of ITN are being worked on in terms of phasing? And actually, this is for both of you. And so what aspects of the ITN are being worked on in terms of phasing implication? Because it seems like most people think that when one phase of ITN ends, then another aspect of the protocol starts being worked on. Is this true?
Well, no, I'll
Not
just go take
not
the first
completely.
part, and yeah, I'll just take the first part, and then I'll let Seppi explain how our development processes work. But we have phases in ITN itself, right, in the node decentralization, and this stuff is just in continuous development. So it's not like we do one thing and then everyone quits with what they've been doing and then they move on to something else. This stuff happens in parallel, but I'll leave the rest to Sepia to explain.
Yeah, that's true. So basically, we are not following the ITN to plan our development. I mean, obviously, as a developer perspective, we look at the ITN and how it works, but this does not impact our planning. I mean, what is the ITN for a developer? This could be a good question. So the ITN for a developer is just a container where we can put our already tested, but not so much tested. So is the container where we release things to test and to open for the community. What does it mean? Does it mean that if we start with the phase that handle the node decentralization, in the meanwhile that the community or people battle test this part, there are a lot of other other developer team that are actively working on other part of the protocol or the project that will be included in the later state, in the later phase of the test. For example, what we have to do right now, we have the core team that is focused on PyCrust, and we have other part of the team that is focused on the consensus porting to Rust and anything else. Those are not things that will be released in the first part of the ITN, but this doesn't mean that we are not working on that. So it's like a rolling. This is why we call it rolling.
Understandable. And from my understanding is that one aspect of the protocol is not deserted, basically, just so we can look on the next one. Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just to add on to this, the inverse of this is also true. So it's not like ITN is designed in a way that it impacts other developers a lot. So the idea behind ITN was we gathered a lot of ideas and we tried to simplify everything as much as possible so that we don't impact development by doing fun stuff on the side, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense well. Okay, so a two-part question for you guys again. How complete will ITN be, and what are the major milestones before mainnet?
Yeah, how complete will ITN be? Yeah, because it's a rolling ITN, we will probably at some point be at a incentivized testnet that might mirror the one that's going to be released during mainnet, right? So the last phase of ITN is something I actually wanted to be equal to the actual live mainnet by modeling the economic model as well. So in that sense, that's what we aim for. So and I guess it makes sense to explain the phasing a bit as well. So the first phase is with the old VM, right? So it's the current consensus, which is almost completely done, I would say, with Cutcast, which is done, with the node infrastructure, which is done, but it's the VM that's still not the new one. So in that sense, that's not completely complete. The second phase will have VM2 and some other features we want to have in there to improve security. So that's what phase 2 will be. And phase 3 will be when we have an audit, when we've processed all the feedback for the ITN, other ITN phases, and when we can simulate the economic model after those features are in there. So then I would say it's like almost complete. It's probably the complete network. And I'll leave that other question, I'll leave that for Sapia, like what are the major milestones? Unless he has to add something to what I said.
That's true. I mean, you forgot to mention something. I mean, in the later stage, when you speak about economic, this is one part of that testnet phase, but we will include after that PyCrust will be rolled out. We start to include in our ITN the deployment of third-party smart contracts, so where people can write down their own smart contract and publish it on chain, against with the XST or the confidential token or the confidential token, and there are other things that are not yet disclosed. So there are other milestones too. But I agree that in the first stage, obviously, that the ITN will be not so much complete. I mean, there will be a lot of modification, but that they will not impact our testing scenario.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
mostly the base layer, right? And when we get to the final phase, we'll also have a business layer added to it. So that's when it gets really exciting. Yeah.
Okay, so business layer as well. Okay, all right, that's great. But was this also basically talking about the iterations of ITN? How many would there be? And what the differences in the goals would be as well, Hein? Was this part of
Yeah,
this?
that's the three I mentioned. So you have the first one that basically has the current tech stack, which is complete consensus, Codcast, and then the old VM. Then you have the second one, which might have some of the smart contracts already on it, and VM2, and some other features I would like to see. And then the third phase would be the audited one where third-party smart contracts are on there, and people can start actually building dApps on it, and then get close to the mainnet launch.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. So the next question is also for you. Will the institutional, and actually this is from the community, so will the institutional pilots commence after March 2023 when the DLT Act gets implemented?
Yeah, like I said before, right? I don't think DLT Act. I'm not sure what the DLT Act is. I assume it's the DLT regime that they're doing in the EU. If it's not, then please mention it in the comments. But that sort of stuff doesn't influence what we are doing. Like I mentioned before, we're already doing some pilots, and what that exactly means, I'll leave up to you to interpret what that means. But we don't hold to some act going on, some legislation happening. We can already start experimenting on a test net in a somewhat private environment. That's fine. There's nobody stopping us. No legislation that's required for that. We can just do that right now. And some of those pilots are already happening, so it's okay.
Okay, that's perfect. So these were some questions from the ITN roadmap. We're going to move on to the reward structure. So how will we be incentivized to run a node, and what will Dusk be doing during this time?
Well, we will just continue working, right? So, but especially Sapia, I'll make sure of that.
Thanks,
But
man.
so when it comes to incentivization of the nodes, what we want to do is we introduce a bit of game theory to it. So we have a fixed pool, and everyone that joins in can get a piece of that pool. And the more people will join in, the less everyone, relatively speaking, will get. So you get closer to a point where where it's game theoretically interesting to join or not join. And then we can see how altruistic most people in the community are. But at the point that you will run at the last, there will need to be a lot of node participants in our testnet. I don't think we will reach that in the beginning, and that's fine. I guess the cutoff point is somewhere where you have at least 1,000 people running a node, which would be fantastic if that were to happen. But the aim we set for phase one, which should end at the end of this year, is 100 nodes. And the reason why we picked 100 nodes is because most blockchains use some sort of Tendermint-derived delegated proof-of-stake network. And if we would be able to reach that threshold that they have, which is around 100 nodes before stuff gets inefficient, then we would be more decentralized than what I figured out to be like more than half of all blockchains that are out there, because there are a lot of them that use a Tendermint-based consensus. So, or some other delegated proof of stake based consensus. So that's the aim for us. If we reach that, that would be fantastic. If we reach more, that would be even greater. For later phases, we want to get to a higher number. And in our documentation, we also extensively mentioned that we want to do geographical diversity so that all the nodes are spread around the world instead of gathered together in the Netherlands. And also to have a mix between home run nodes, between different online providers, and to make sure that we are as decentralized as possible.
That's great. I have two more questions from the community. So what are the incentivization types and rates?
Yeah, so I mean, there are multiple, right? So if you talk about the Learn and Earn program, you will get a very small amount of Dusk for answering some questions. If you participate in a hackathon, you can get prize pools that can be a couple $1,000 worth of Dusk if you're based on the place you are in, like a first, second, or third place. If you are a node operator, you can get, like, for instance, 1,000 Dusk for just setting up a node and running consensus, which would probably take you 1 hour or 2. But that depends on participation rates. And I know that there was a question about skin in the game.
Yes.
That's like how much Dusk you have to stake. So
Yes.
this is not something that we will be doing in the first phase. We might be doing that in the second, but in the third phase we will do a sort of log-up where you do have to have skin in the game, where we do want to model the economic Dusk model, and where you can earn a relative share of, for instance, a 1-month run of the nodes.
That's perfectly fine. Okay.
And don't forget the bug bounty program that we will open in the future.
Yeah,
Yes.
of course. Yeah, right. You're right. Yeah, so a bug bounty program is another thing. I guess that's pretty advanced for the majority of our community, but that's also a way you can earn. And of course, the rates and types of incentivization depend on the criticality of the exploit you find, on how close we are to actually having an economical viable thing going on, and on what sort of component you find the bug in.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I almost forgot about the bug bounty as well in that scenario.
Yeah, because this is not something that we want to open in the early stage, because I mean the bug bounty, usually it's open at very later stage.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It makes more sense to do it in a more advanced one as well. But thank you for that. Sepia, is there a minimum of uptime required to be eligible for the reward pool?
Yeah. We think to set the threshold. I am not sure what is the threshold for sure. It should be a sort of 70 or 75% of uptime. But I will leave this information for the near future. But there is a minimum time required.
Okay.
That's for sure.
So this will all be. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things with 75%, of course, is because we will be running, like, to be eligible, you need to run in a 4-week span, and 75% uptime would mean that in those 4 weeks you can be offline for a week, and that would give us some room to as well, with people just dropping out on purpose and seeing what sort of impact that has on consensus, right? So that's why we leave some wiggle room there.
Okay.
Okay,
Makes
that's
sense.
perfect. Yeah, it does, absolutely. So we're gonna move from the reward structure. If anyone has questions, again, submit your question is open at this point in time. So leave anything over in that channel. So I believe people did want to know about what the ambassador program is and how does the community get involved. Being your community builder, I can give you a bit of I guess, a brief explanation. So with the ambassador program, it is meant as a collection of initiatives with the power to create a solid core of loyal followers that publicly express their interest in our project. They would carry on the tasks of evangelizing the crowd and participate in several initiatives. They could be spontaneous or planned, aimed at creating awareness and, well, pretty much awareness about Dusk. And it could be in any community. So the goals are the ambassador program would include to educate participants in the Dusk mission and vision, use participants to funnel our messages to external communities, especially those where we are underexposed, like for example on Reddit, to have ambassadors and educate new members of the Dusk community. In essence, they're a trained group of people who would understand our purpose and align with us on the mission and vision messaging. So the incentives that we're looking at for this time, they're going to be intrinsic due to the passion for Dusk, financial as they are most likely already holder of the token. So the more exposure you give to other communities, the more the community grows, the more people would want to also, get into it as well. Honor being part of a special group of Duskketeers. I think we're already kind of on that path. Gifts in the form of unique gear targeted towards ambassadors, like shirts with Dusk Ambassador imprinted. and participatory, invite them to events to represent our community. So you guys would be first ones on the list as an example. So we're quite excited about that. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And I did want to ask Hein this question on why the value incentivization was kind of put in this way, and how would it overall benefit the community outside of just like the exposure that I've mentioned.
For the ambassador program.
Yes, for the ambassador program. That's right. We went on it together because we understand the community, and we talked about the incentives together, and these seem like the most, like the ones that would give the most value proposition. So yeah. So my question is, like, how is it that we came down to these particular specifics on the incentivization? Is it because the community has always been like, hey, we want to have this specific thing or that specific thing, or we heard too much about the when questions, or yeah, that's basically what I'm asking.
I mean, it's of course multifaceted.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I consider this, you have a lot of people in this community that understand what we're doing, right?
Mhm.
But aren't always super clear about certain aspects, or that really want to help and engage in informing other people. And what we sort of miss is a bit more documentation, a bit deeper explanations of reasons why we do certain things. And the idea with the ambassador program is to help these people, like they have a very deep interest in Dusk, and then come together in a sort of group where we can educate each other a bit more about specifics and fill in the gaps that are there, and give them opportunities to also meet the team, I guess, more often, to maybe even go to events with us to help us promote Dusk and see stuff going on in action. And excite other people about it, right?
Yeah. So I'm guessing that even on Telegram and Discord, as an example, we might also run a channel where we can actually have these ambassadors kind of get in touch with us for what may be happening locally in their communities as well, and see how we can push, some, let's say, events, or let's say if there's something that we would like to do in regards to communication online. So it's like an amplification of our messaging. And I think it's about that time that we get our community involved as well in these certain aspects of the image and, of course, communication amplification at this point in time.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be a shill farm, but what we can do is what we currently lack is, like, for instance, when we introduce a new article, and people find it insightful and useful, then it's, of course, it gets shared a bit on Twitter, or maybe some comments in our chats. But I would like to see a bit more engagement there. Like, for instance, when we have Reddit, for instance, on our own Reddit, someone posts it, or some group of people start posting it on different subreddits and then liking each other's posts, so that we can get a bit more exposure as well, right?
Yeah, and of course, I'm always watching the communities, so the more active you are, I mean, I'd pretty much be like, hey, why not be in
This one's ripe for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and of course, we're also doing a bit a drive towards thought leadership, of course, with Emma and with Ryan. And there are some hashtags that we want to co-opt, that we want to basically claim for ourselves, right? Because we've been talking about them for so long, and we want to build thought leadership around that. So the community can help us gain that status, right?
Absolutely. And like I said, it's about time, because
Yeah.
as we push for ITN, it's going to become more amplification. So the next question I'm going to ask is also based on, well, it's going to be based on Wiki. So what's the status of the tutorials in the Wiki, Hein?
Yeah, so the wiki is at the moment being written internally. It will be published at some point for everyone else. And I must say, I'm very happy to see that internally we've been using it a lot more. I've seen a lot of people in the company actually contributing to it, defining our processes, both those that are private as well as those that are and can be made public. For ITN as well, we've been writing a lot of content. For instance, like a glossary that explains all of the words that we use and the difficult naming schemes we have. And there are a couple of other things on there that will be of value. Even the research team is contributing by writing research related topics on there, and we can, once we publish it, we can also iterate a bit more on making it more accessible. Yeah, it's a bit of a process to get everyone aligned to contribute to it, but so far it's going pretty good.
That's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna ask.
I'm really happy with. I'm really happy with the fact that people are jumping on it and actually taking initiative there. So.
Yes, absolutely. It's the wiki has been a great undertaking, and also want to thank some internal team members as well, like Max and Jade, to be working on those, and of course Mel's too. So it's
Yeah, and I mean, I think Kieran has contributed for the UI stuff, Moana for research stuff, Marcus, who's in here, shout out to Marcus on the marketing process stuff. So and Ryan, of course, with his Mika articles, compiling that sort of material. So very nice.
absolutely, and thank you as well, Hein, because you've been taking care of the ITN side of the wiki too. So it's fantastic. So Hein, this was a question given by a community member. So it says, since ITN now has a solid definition and framework within the foundation, what other ITNs did you look at the most? Solana, for example, was mentioned a while ago, but maybe something changed.
Oh, we looked at so many. Like for instance, we did look at Solana. We did look at, I think, the Cosmos game of stakes, and they did another one. The Aptos, the Sui one, like all of these new blockchains. And I must say, a lot of them, and we also actually looked at Optimism's airdrop. Not that the airdrop is relevant in a way. Not that we're doing an airdrop, by the way. If you see that, that's a scam. But the way that they did the counting of the points, right? We looked at that sort of stuff, and there were a lot of cool, interesting ideas, but some of these ideas would be pretty expensive to implement and impossible to do on chain due to the nature of a testnet. So I opted to not go for all the fancy cool stuff that would be expensive to implement and distract people from development in favor of doing something cool that will only last like 2 weeks, right? So that's a trade-off. That's a cost-benefit trade-off in favor of not going too crazy. I think that what we did mostly from what others did is learn what not to do. And what we didn't want to do is make it like a short marketing gimmick that basically gives us no data to use. And that's why we opted for this approach. I think we're pretty unique in this approach. I don't think there's anyone out there that's doing a multi-month ITN, or a couple ones that do phases. And some of these phases for them were trivial. And I think that our phasing is pretty extensive because every new phase you do get a lot of new stuff. And we also opted to do other side activities, which I don't think others did with their ITN. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, it gives a bit of an insight into what exactly we looked at, just to see what could actually work for us and what not. I think this particular question is kind of aimed at me, basically in regards to asking if there's going to be a YouTube series for Dusk being explained, a podcast of the Internet of Assets if they were stopped. So at this point in time, the podcast Internet of Assets is still on. We're just going through specific things like focusing on ITN, and that's exactly what the mission was. So we want to make sure that, yes, we go parallel to other things that we want to work as well. But at this point in time, we'll resume after, of course, the ITN has kind of been pushed through. YouTube series, absolutely. I think we will have more things in the future, especially within this ITN setup, in regards to running nodes and whatnot. Other things, I think the other question would be DuskCon. I can't specifically answer for that one. I think what will happen is that if there's anything of a setup of a larger event, we will let the community know first thing, and especially for people within our ambassador program. We want to make sure for the amplification we have as many of you on these specific larger events participating, especially. And of course, this also extends to any kind of social media campaigns we're going to be running too. I think whenever that happens, I will communicate all of these facets of the campaigns with you guys. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Just keep in touch with me. I'm always on the community side anyways on Telegram and Discord. So if there's any specific questions about events, you can always come and ask me specifically. So yeah, that was possibly the last question. And well, no, there is one more question, Hein, and it's a very special.
Wait, sorry. I first want to tag on to that last question.
Yeah, of course.
In terms of YouTube, there will be videos, tutorials on how to run a node as well. And we will be doing a webinar. We're looking to do it next week, Thursday. And there we will walk through the steps. And people can ask questions during the event. And most likely, I will be running, me or Sepia or both, will be running, helping someone of our team set up a node as well on the local machine. So
oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so like I was going through with the last question, Hein, when ITN, the most popularly requested question from everyone?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm secretly maybe onboarding myself right now, but yeah, we will start onboarding people tomorrow.
All right. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. And finally, this question can be it can be late because everyone wanted to know, and we wanted to make sure that we give the excitement to the community. We're really happy on this accomplishment as well. We're working extra hard, and that's why I was also very quiet too with the questions. So I'm really happy about this, and congratulations to, of course, the core devs who have worked really hard, and the rest of the team too. So
I see a number of questions flying in. So I'll just get at them as they come in. So how many first runners and how will you choose? So we will have a little form, but that will be shown in the guide that we will be publishing. And when you go to the guide, you will need to collect a couple of data points. And you will need to send us those data points. And those data points can be added in a Google form, so it's very easy and very accessible for everyone. I think it will just be first come, first serve. So if you're the first that gets in that form or uses that guide, then we will put you on a list. We will send you some testnet Dusk, and you can start onboarding. So there's no preferential mechanism there. Everyone that was on the email list will get an email, a notification that we're going to start. And yeah, that's it. So Duskinor asks, onboard me first? Yeah, probably. He'll probably be sitting there refreshing.
it seems like a few more questions. If there's no more questions, then I'll probably wrap up. If it's just a statement, then let's see. Perfect. Okay, so it looks like there's no more questions. So I'm just gonna finish this session for now. That marks the end of our discussion with Hein and Emanuele and Sepia on Rolling ITN. I did want to clarify that in Discord we have an ITN Daylight subtopic, and you can leave more questions in the feedback and the future nodes channel, which we'll probably release today as well, for any further communications. And we're also probably able to devise Twitter spaces after this specific discussion. So thank you all for being part of this session and gracing us with yourselves to our humble community of Dusk enthusiasts. It was a pleasure to hear from the outlook and perspective on Rolling ITN from our core developers and its goals that the team had. It is indeed thought-provoking and insightful, and we look forward to seeing you in the next discussion, albeit on a different topic. Next one definitely pertaining to something else. Specifically, I believe I'm doing something with Ryan next. So for now, to our community, thank you so much for being here today, and this includes our team members as well. I appreciate all of you for giving us your time for the current session. We will hopefully see you in the next 3 weeks for the next one.
Again, this is being recorded, so you will be able to hear this within your convenience after the links are provided. So take care and have a good morning or evening wherever you are tuned in from. Take care, thank you, and salutations.